Individual prototypes cost money. It's that simple. And then many of those prototypes, if you want that prototype to be in the exact fabric, as we mentioned before, you're going to have to run a certain amount of yardage to knit, weave, or dye.
So that's time.
So that's time and money, right?
Welcome to Clothing Culture, a fashion industry podcast at the intersection of technology and innovation. I'm Emily Lane.
And I'm Bret Schnitker. We speak with experts and disruptors who are moving the industry forward and discuss solutions to real industry challenges.
Clothing Culture is produced by Stars Design Group, a global design and production house with more than 30 years of experience. Welcome back to another episode of Clothing Culture. Today, we're back at the bar, our space for candid conversations sparked by listener questions. In this episode, we're diving into product development cycle, from that first spark of inspiration for a new collection through the stages of prototyping, manufacturing, and everything in between. For those new to the industry, the process can feel overwhelming, full of unexpected steps, timelines, and decisions. So today, we're breaking it all down to bring clarity to the creative journey. Bret, welcome back to the bar.
Thank you.
Only we don't have a beverage. What's wrong with us?
I know, you're breaking it all down, but...
With no juice.
With no liquid. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about
It's Dry Thursday. Yeah.
It's just too early in the day. Maybe at the end of the episode. Let's start.
Maybe our listeners will start drinking as we get through this episode based on how we're starting.
Pretty sure of that. Let's start at the beginning and talk about the concept and ideation phase. You know, people get that idea. They're like, I think I have the next best idea, or it might even just be the beginning of a new collection. How do these ideas typically start? What are the influences that happen, that shape these amazing new ideas?
Drugs and alcohol, usually. No.
Here we are, back at the bar.
Yeah, back at the bar. Every day we get these kind of inquiries, and I think all these great ideas, surely there's not a ton of new ideas, but we constantly get people that are involved in some activity, have been surrounded by some circumstance, and they come up with a new idea. Yeah. And, I think, events that establish need create good opportunity for new brands. And we're finding a lot of these kind of popping up where they find a missing link, if you will, in a particular product and approach us about it. And we got on that path of developing it. Sometimes they don't have the answers either, right?
Sure. You gotta work through it, and that can take time. So, what's that first step of turning this great idea into a working design?
A lot of conversation. I think really understanding the scope of the project is super important. A good distillation. And that's done through, asking a number of very pointed questions, understanding not only what the customer thinks they want, but some of the more detail that they might not be thinking through, because in many cases, the people that approach us about doing these kind of things haven't been in the business before. Mm-hmm. So some of these questions kind of establish some of the challenges that might put in place and make them think through that.
Right, absolutely. What about things like when it comes to fabric decisions and, helping to guide people through that process? I mean, like you said, a lot of these people haven't been in the business before. There's pros and cons to different fabrications. How do you really guide people who are at this for the first time?
It's, again, when it comes to fabrication, the world's our oyster here. We've got 50,000 swatches plus to choose from, but not every fabric has its place for a particular program. So understanding climatic objectives, durable objectives, performance items that they'd like to achieve. Once we distill what the particular product is, what they want it to achieve, that helps us guide the path, at least in terms of composition. Mm-hmm. And then we kind of go down the path in terms of maybe an aesthetic or a finish, a weight, color, all those
those
things.
details. So 3D can play a big role at this stage too, because you can really play around with aesthetics and
Ideation of pattern and styling for sure.
Yeah, that's great. Let's talk about the materials just a little bit more. How do you reference having a robust library as a resource, but when it comes time to actually making that fabric for that program, how do you go about determining the right fit for manufacturing or knitting or weaving of a particular fabrication?
Some of it's trial and error. Sometimes we're going to go through and we show our clients a variety of fabrics. They make some decisions on those. If there are meters in stock of a particular fabric, and that's fewer and far between nowadays. Sometimes you have to knit or weave to order, and we can do small volume.
And that takes quite a bit of time, doesn't it?
It can take 30 to 45 days. Some of our partners can knit as small as, really 100 meters is a good running quantity. Any less than that, you kind of, the machine doesn't have a chance to get up and running. But you can, for our industry, that's pretty small meterage. And either we pull it, finding it available, or we knit this minimum meterage, and then we put it into the garment with, all the details that we have. The customer can try it on. We can run fabric tests on those particular fabrications. If the garment is going to come up against a lot of abrasives, we can run Martindale tests, which are this kind of test that rubs one fabric against another for a certain amount of cycles and determine if the fabric is durable enough for a particular event. We can do snagging. We can do color fastness to light if the customer's outside all the time. And sometimes that's a learning process. We inherently know fabrics that are stronger than others. We know dye stuffs that'll perform better than others. But the nuance actually comes down to it when you're practically working through the program.
There's also strengths and weaknesses globally of certain countries and certain fabrics. So synthetic fabrics, for example, are much more common out of China.
Sure.
And of course, natural, you'll see more in India. So I imagine those kinds of things play an active role in determining where you're going to have your fabric come from.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Right now, we've got some global supply chain disruptions. How does that affect sourcing when it comes to this side of, or this phase of the project?
Speaking about wanting a drink, it's been really interesting. And every day is a new twist and turn. I feel like I'm on some economic roller coaster. But all of those things have all these things that are coming across the table today are complicating our landscape. Because it used to be a little more straightforward. Hey, we're going to go here for our fabric. We're going to go here for our CM. And today, based upon tariffs and real wars and freight and logistics issues and timing and all of those things, every time you add some unique thing into our manufacturing landscape, you just got another thing to manage. And it requires perhaps in some cases more time to think through that. Some cases, if China's the best place to make synthetics still today, other countries have yet to catch up, yet China's tariff is very high, then we need to make a decision on the country of origin for fabric and then the country of manufacture for garment. Not all countries, and we think it could be simple. Hey, let's just pick up that fabric, let's say it's synthetic, and move it to India. Well, tariffs are kind of crazy there, so let's move it to someplace else.
And sometimes that skill set isn't established because working with a synthetic fabric in a cut and sew environment is completely different.
If you're used to managing natural fibers and you're trying to sew synthetics, it's a completely different thing. And it can range factor by factor and country by country. And so it really requires, one, an understanding of the manufacturing world that we live in. And then two, trying to have some sort of a crystal ball, understanding this whole landscape politically that we're dealing with and helping customers move through that.
A lot of times people are eager to, they'll call and say, hey, I have an idea. What can I do to get a sample or a prototype made? And a lot of times that's not the first step. And so, and a lot of times there are alternate times in which you can go down the sampling path. And so I'd love for you to explain when the time is right to kind of start your process with prototyping and sampling, and then when it makes more sense to just kind of tuck it into the traditional process of going down the production path.
Individual prototypes cost money. It's that simple. And then many of those prototypes, if you want that prototype to be in the exact fabric, as we mentioned before, you're going to have to run a certain amount of yardage to knit, weave, or dye.
So that's time.
So that's time and money, right? The individual just has to decide what they want, what path they want to go down. If they have a certain launch date, all of those things, to your point, take up a certain amount of time. And with the logistics issues, the challenges on small parcel today, getting through after de minimis was eliminated now, it extends the time that you can actually go into production and then ultimately go to market. And so customers can make that choice and say, look, I want to work through all the details up front. So I'm confident that I'm making the right decision and it's all put together in one garment. Then I'll write what's called a purchase order, a contract to purchase goods. It extends the lead time, but it provides probably a lot more transparency into a particular garment, especially if that garment or item is unique or unique in some way, new technology employed, new spec employed, things like that. People want to work through that. And here there have been some really complex products, and I think people underestimate the time that R&D takes. R&D can take 6 months sometimes.
Right.
Reiterations of that product,
Scope
redevelopments
creep.
of that product, sometimes scope creep. Hey, I thought this was going to work and I want to change this nuance. Well, that changes all the patterns, that changes all the rework, requires another sample. So time can really, really be an enemy along that path. Technology today has helped in that respect for people that trust the technology with, like you mentioned, 3D design. We actually, at Stars, use 3D design to help speed up a lot of these initial processes. We can take our patterns, our 3D design developed from the pattern file and put it into a virtual environment so the customer at least can look at style, pattern, and fit in a virtual environment and speed that up, make some tweaks and decisions with respect to that. It's kind of hard to really visualize the fabric in a 3D environment to this point. There's a lot of physical attributes you can plug into a 3D environment, but you really physically can't touch and feel. And therein lies the issue. People that walk into the business, they kind of want to wear it, touch and feel it, they personalize it.
Yes, and so that I'm so glad you brought up fit, because this is absolutely a common misunderstanding is that, going through this process, the first thing you do when you get your samples is you need to do wear tests. You need to put them on fit models and lots of different bodies and get feedback. Can you talk about when that's right to go through that process versus leaning on technology?
Yeah, that's a big conversation. So people that are just starting up the business don't have a lot of background and experience in garments. I would say that understanding the scope of the product first and then employing science of fit. We use Alvanon here pretty regularly, and they scan thousands of bodies around the world. They run algorithms. They create amazing blocks to be able to grade from, create grade rules. There's a lot of science to fit that you can employ if you need to. And those at every step before you actually go into a lot of prototyping, you do have to address fit, right? And so I think it's all part of that process. But the question is, how do you engage fit? How can you be sort of fit objective? So many clients that walk in the door become very fit subjective. They try it on themselves. They consider themselves the client because they're the ones that came up with the idea. And a lot of the clients will try them on themselves and say, well, this doesn't fit right or whatever, without considering where do I fit on that particular fit spectrum to my customer. And so it's really important to, one, use science of fit, employ it at the right stage, and be as fit objective as you can, understanding if the individual that's starting this brand is, let's say, 3 inches shorter than the average consumer, or has arms that are 2 inches longer, or they're thinner than the average consumer for the target market. Understanding where they fit on that spectrum so that when they're trying on garments themselves, they understand, oh, this should fit a little bit looser to me or a little bit longer because I might be a little bit shorter than the scientific customer that I'm trying to target.
We've seen customers that have that new idea that's highly technical in nature that they can kind of just want to tweak on forever. You know, oh, but what if we do this and what if we do that? And
some of that's insecurity, right? If you've not gone down this path 100 times, if you're not an established brand that has defined your fit or defined your DNA into the market, we find that all the time. It's just like, hey, I want every little nuance and detail to be correct.
Perfect.
And I guess I always say, some of it's by intent, of course, but Apple's $1 trillion company.
Right.
They have 17 coming out, 17 iPhone models. They didn't start with the iPhone being perfect.
Right.
And I would say the same goes for our industry. It's a journey. You start with trying to develop the best possible product with the knowledge that you have on hand today. And then as you gather more knowledge and or if the market moves or there's technology that enhances that product, you evolve it along the way. The benefit is the product gets better with learned information. And 2, people want to come back for the new and improved model. So it's kind of a win-win.
And you can get good feedback, right? From your
100%.
customer.
But you can't usually get good feedback until you really get it out there.
Yeah. So how do you know, okay, it's ready. It's time to lean in. It's time to move this into production and get this to market?
That you've gone through all the fundamental steps of what we do in pre-production. You know, we go through the style and design detail in a digital format. You get to take a look at that. You check that off. You go through all the pre-production steps in terms of fabric choices, trim choices, color choices. All that gets checked off. We do prototypes, usually between 1 and 3 prototypes for pre-production processes. 1, usually if it's a very, very simple product, 3 if it's more complex and you have some iterations. Once you go through those for specific fit, you try them on the forms, you feel like it's really, really good. Then you've checked off all the pre-production steps of that process and you're ready to go into production.
So how long is that cycle on average from I've got the idea to I've gone through the prototyping phase to, okay, everything's approved and we're ready to go into production?
In our timing and action grid, we give between 60 and 90 days. If product gets a little more complicated, it can be up to 6 months.
And then what about now we're in production? How long we're now actually cutting and sewing and making these garments come to life? How long should somebody plan for that stage?
For production alone, the world is pretty similar in terms of production timelines, and it falls within a band of 90 to 120 days.
Okay. And then let's talk about getting the goods to you. There's variances depending on where you're making.
Yeah.
You know, it takes longer to ship out of certain ports, out of certain countries.
Roughly, China's 30 days to a coast. India's probably 45 days once you have mother and feeder vessels and things like that. Vietnam's 28 days, you always want to, I would say you always want to plan 45 to 60 because that would ensure that you've got both freight covered if you're going by boat and clearance, because we still have clearance to deal with and pickup of trucks and delivery to a warehouse. And so 45 to 60 days is usually a good number for the transit portion if you're going by ocean or boat.
Are there, before you got it loaded on a vessel, we're still in the production lines here. Are there common pitfalls that people experience, new-time people experience at this phase that, their production could be vulnerable for, and how would you avoid those?
Well, if you don't have a detailed enough tech pack, we build tech packs here. And tech packs, for those that aren't aware of them, they're blueprints for production. When you build a house, you've got all these blueprints. The more detailed the blueprint, the better the house comes out, because you're giving the contractor
no room for error.
guidelines and parameters in terms of,
Yes.
there is in every blueprint a little bit of room for error, right?
Okay.
We call those tolerances in the apparel business. And so those tolerances are allowed in spec, right? If a chest is 24 inches across, sometimes we have a certain percentage or a certain tolerance plus or minus that allows 3/4 of an inch to be larger or smaller in that chest, because nothing's exacting in an organic fabric type situation or business. And so it's really important to start with a very, very detailed tech pack. Most don't know how to build a detailed tech pack. We abdicated manufacturing years ago, so a lot of people aren't really taught.
You mean those in the
United States, for sure. Sorry to be specific. But making sure that you've got one that lays all that out a good way to ensure that you don't have issues. Vetting the right manufacturing partner is, again, super important. There are thousands of factories all around the world. I've been in thousands of factories, and there's a wide scale of expertise and performance. Just because you put up walls and have sewing machines and sewers, doesn't mean that they really know how to do product well, or a particular product well. And so you have to make sure that you're vetting the particular factory in a good way. Outside of social compliances and everything else, it's about how they manage, and there are ways to walk through a factory to ensure that they're making a product right. Then you cannot inspect in good quality. You've got to make sure quality is done on the line. So there needs to be some supervision and making sure you're making the right decision with a factory partner. But to ensure that the product, that when it's finished, before it gets on a boat, and you're committing to a lot more expense, independent inspections are sort of a norm today. And there are a number of inspection companies around the world. We have a global contract with UL. We utilize them for both fabric and garment inspection. So all of our fabrics are independently inspected for a battery of tests to make sure that as the fabric moves to the CM warehouse or the CM factory, which is cut and make factory to assemble the garments, that we don't have issues in fabric. And so once all of that's passed, once the factory has made all of the garments, then an independent inspector will go in and pull a sample selection of an entire shipment, and he has a checklist that he reviews. We break it into critical, majors, and minors. Criticals are, there's a needle in a kid's clothing, that would be bad news. The entire shipment's rejected immediately. There's no going forward, and it has to be fully re-inspected. Majors are something that a customer would see on a garment and cause them not to buy the garment because it's a visible defect, a hole, or a hole that's not fashionable hole, right? And then minors and it's a much shorter list, but it's a loose thread or untrimmed thread on the inside. A customer would never return or not buy the garment. It's something that we in the industry think could be a little bit better in terms of that production. And so that independent inspector will go through and take the sample lot, look for criticals, majors, and minors. They'll measure a number of garments to make sure that the factory's doing a good job in terms of maintaining the specifications within tolerance based on what we've had. And once we have that report, combined with our fabric report, combined with a good vetted partner, then you really raise the
confidence level,
level that you're going to have consistent good product all the time. And all of that can occur before it goes on a boat.
I think it's important to set an expectation here. I mean, manufacturing still is a human process for the most part.
For the most part,
right?
Every day more and more technology gets laid into the lines.
But the point is, you're never going to have a perfect shipment.
There is no such thing as a perfect shipment.
So what is the industry standard for, what would be deemed, products that you wouldn't want included in the shipment, or where there might be a failure?
Yeah, it's an interesting ratio, but inspectors today use what's called an AQL system, and that AQL system allows for these criticals, majors, and minors, and they there's all these different levels of an AQL system. Today, a lot use a 2.5, 4.0 AQL, and that means that there's this table that's associated with these numbers, and when you pull that sample lot and you move over to 2.5, it's a very, very tight allowance for the number of majors that exist in a shipment. And
majors and minors, right?
2.5 is only focused on the majors.
Okay.
And then there's this 4.0, the 2.5, 4.0. 4.0 is the indication that they would use this table and go down and look for minors. It's a more lenient tolerance on minors and a much more tighter tolerance on majors. It has a 0 critical. And so as shipments go through, inspectors always find majors and minors. Every shipment that I have seen for 30 years always has some of them. Even when it comes to specifications, especially like in knitwear, you will see inspectors calling out variances to spec. And that's why tolerances are really important to understand, because there are things in knitwear we call super fabrics. If you don't open up the tolerances on super fabrics, waffles, for instance, if someone pads a waffle down one different way, one inspector versus the factory line or whatever else, it has a much bigger movement organically. So you could produce everything right. Someone pushes that down, it spreads it out, and you're out of tolerance. Right. So understanding fabrics and understanding tolerances, understanding unique production protocols like garment dyeing that can, a garment can be in spec and then there's more variances, all play roles in determining that, that final acceptance level.
But the industry, from what I've read, hovers around 8% or something like that you can anticipate.
I've seen numbers like that. I've seen numbers as high as 20% sometimes. And, it could be that fast fashion plays a big role in skewing that, because I don't really believe in fast fashion. There's a whole lot of focus on quality control. Yeah. I think the better product moves from fast fashion to moderate to better to haute couture. There's probably much tighter levels of quality. And so I would say, you can, in a normal better shipment, you probably are looking somewhere around between majors and minors, somewhere around 2 to 3% in your shipment will have some of those.
So you're getting ready to ship your goods. You've mentioned if somebody chooses to ship via boat, obviously air is an option. It's more expensive, but when would it be the right decision to ship or via boat or air?
Sure. I don't think there's ever a right profitable decision to air anything. Air eats up a lot of profit.
What's the difference in, what's the number? Is it times 2, times 3?
3 to 4 times more expensive than boat.
Okay.
And then weight and bulkiness play a big role in air because of the cubic volume and the challenges that you have filling the belly of a plane. Like they charge a lot for really heavy items and really bulky items. If you can fit a whole lot of those, like really lightweight t-shirts, that multiplier might be a little bit lower, but it's still very expensive. So there are times that air, a decision to air will be used. And so some of those times are you have a dated event, you've made a decision late, you've got to get it in. Well, air saves, if we're saying rounding it off 60 days to get stuff shipped and cleared and delivered to a warehouse, air can be 5 to 15 days, depending on where it's coming from. So that saves a whole lot of time. Filling into demand, air can be helpful too, especially in a better market where there's more margin. Sometimes capturing lightning in a bottle for a really great style that maybe you've underbought, you want to get back in and manage the season. You can figure out a calculation where if you're airing product as opposed to just intentionally overbuying product up front, the savings on chasing product and chasing product to a known demand level to a degree, like, hey, I'm selling 100 of those every week. I know that if I want that product to be in for the next 5 weeks, I'm above 500, I'm going to air it because of what I voted in and I'm chasing that business. If you buy it that tightly and you kind of chase it by air, you eliminate markdowns on the backside. You don't overbuy unintentionally. So by eliminating markdowns, which is a pure expense, right? And choosing to buy a little bit tighter, or once you've determined demand of a particular product in a business, the additional cost of air still provides profitability and eliminates markdowns. So sometimes that makes sense.
That's the right
too.
decision. Yeah. So you've got your goods, you're selling them, and it's time to start all over. So, if you're talking about replenishment or you're looking at your new collection, is it the same amount of timeline that we've just talked through, or do things get a little bit condensed once you're in a cycle of replenishment?
When you're starting all over literally with new styles, the timeline remains the same. When you're talking about replenishment or filling back into existing styles, core basics, let's say, you've established 15 colors of a basic t-shirt, and you've already run the t-shirt, you're saving a lot of pre-production approval steps. You can move quicker. And so we've seen times where, let's say, something normally takes 90 days, they can do those reorders in 70 days. You save about 20 days in terms of that. There are things you can do to decrease the amount of time on those reorders, especially on basics. You can put, we call grayish fabric commitments in place. Grayish is undyed fabric. So, fabric knitting times can be 2 to 4 weeks about. So you save 2 to 4 weeks in terms of that fabric in the long production cycle. And then if you have dyeing, if you have garments that are pre-dyed, that can add another 2 or 3 weeks. And so if you have fabric that's in place already, completely dyed, you're speeding up that cycle.
Sure.
And there are a lot of companies on basics that not only have fabric in store, they also have production planned. And that's been a big thing that factories love to have, benefits the clients, but clients are always hesitant to do, and that's planned production for factories. Give them forecasts. With forecasts, they're able to reserve garment lines. If there's an open line that you've reserved for a forecast, goods will move quickly through that. Things that can blow the whole thing up in terms of fast reorder times is the factory doesn't have to go through all the approvals anymore because they've already got the recipes for dyeing and knitting and garment construction. But what happens if someone's come in and taken up all the production lines in the CM factory? You're then pushed back out to 90 to 120 days until that other production run gets kind of pulled through. So there are all these things that you can do to really collaborate with a factory, a mill and a factory to speed up your production, but it really does take planning.
Coordination, yeah. Well, from idea to garment, thank you for helping to demystify the product development cycle. Are there any other pieces of advice you'd like to share before we wrap this up and get that cocktail we were dreaming about at the beginning of this conversation?
Yeah, I would say, look, it's a fascinating business, but you can make a lot of money or lose a lot of money in this business. So it's important to be very intentional about each step. It's super important to make sure that you're picking the right partners and asking all the right questions. And I think, not being in a rush at the outset. Let the process take the time that it needs to. Sometimes the process will move very, very quickly. Sometimes that process will take a lot longer. And then understand that garment production and manufacture is only part of the whole business cycle. Make sure that you, on the other side, have all those elements in place to address consumer awareness and demand and fulfillment
marketing. Sales and yes,
because
that's
we
a
found
whole
people,
other conversation.
We found people that have built this wonderful product and run out of money or not put any plans in place to go market their product or use the wrong marketing partners or the wrong marketing plan, and the product just sits.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Well, thank you for that advice. Thank you for joining us today. Don't forget to subscribe and stay apprised of upcoming conversations.